All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of Leverage Lane here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. Make sure to tap that thumbs up on the way in. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for all the other free shows. But we're back for week 13. We're breaking down the main slate from a single entry GPP Focus perspective. We're going to talk about ownership, probably in ways you don't hear too often around the industry. We're going to put it all together, find out what the common build looks like, how to leverage the common build, and then at the end, my partner in crime and I, Mr. Alex Blickle, we will get to our leverage lane for the week. And Alex, I'll bring you in. It's a holiday week. I know everyone feels a little drowsy, a little bit behind, myself included, but excited for this one always. We had a special edition that went really well with our man Hoopster on Wednesday, getting ready for Thanksgiving. But we're back. It's a Black Friday extended week as well, by the way. Like if your email inbox isn't filled with a million emails, I feel like I thought Black Friday was 3 weeks ago. I've been getting emails since, and now it's extended as well. So what's going on, my man? How you doing?
Doing very well. It was a fun Thanksgiving slate of football. Had a pretty good like DraftKings slate for Thanksgiving. But then yesterday, my Eagles get the loss. The saving grace of the weekend was the Pick'em prop side of things. Had a really nice hit on Thanksgiving. I did the same last year. So Thanksgiving apparently is really, really kind to pick them. But yeah, I'm really excited for this slate. I think, it's something we've said a bunch this year where it's like, hey, this slate feels like it's probably going to be more low scoring, which is the kind of slate that you and I really like. Maybe this is actually the low scoring slate, because it is ugly from a stack perspective. It's ugly from, an obvious value perspective. I've got high hopes that this is one of the low scoring slates, which I historically have done a lot better in.
Yeah, me too. And that's what I like. Shout out to everybody getting in. Our man Beetlebane says this is a great slate for Leverage Lane. Kenny downstairs said this is quite the slate, but someone has to win. He's right. He's correct. So hopefully we can help you guys with that. Last week, man, to your JSN call, that was very nice and happened pretty quickly as well. I was like, all right, you want to leave this guy? He'll just roll. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it a little bit on the Thursday show, but I had Jameis Winston, I had Wan'Dale Robinson, I had Smith and Jigba, and I had Jahmyr Gibbs. They combined for over 160 points. That's more points than my week one lineup that almost won $1 million. And I barely min cashed. It's insane just how high scoring these slates have been. And the thing about that is, like, when you have those contrarian separator calls that hit in a huge way, they just don't separate as much because so much of the chalk is also hitting in a big way. And it's been really frustrating. But, I think the thing to keep in mind is, like, even if this slate wasn't so ugly, we know with certainty that not every single slate is going to be high scoring. And I do still think there's a strong advantage in asking yourself, what does the slate look like if it's low scoring? How does that happen? And then how do I take advantage of that?
Yeah, and even last week was crazy. Like some people said, you could have 2 or 3 pieces right, but you needed a lot more than that. If you just had Gibbs, great. Those 58 points were awesome, but it was like you needed more to go with it. My stack last week started super strong. Your Eagles, by the way, and I mean 2 punishments for you back to back. By the way, Ravens took the L as well too on Thanksgiving. So it's like our team's losing, but your guys were up 21-0 early. It was all AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. I was loving it. Hurts is doing his thing. The Cowboys couldn't really keep up until they could, and then they actually came back and won. So that was devastating from an Eagles fan perspective, but it didn't really help for DFS that the Eagles did nothing in the second half. And then, your team yesterday, just tough scene, but maybe it's helpful. We'll see. The Bears making fun of them after, saying they knew exactly what was going to happen and how predictable it was. Like that type of stuff is a really tough scene in the NFL. But I got to say, other side of it, as like zero bias to either of those teams, Ben Johnson, that fired up speech in the locker room. I live for that shit. I love that stuff, man. And his guys are clearly bought in. People can say what they want about schedules and all this stuff, but you can only play what's put in front of you. You have to beat the teams that you draw, and they've done a good job of doing that. So congrats to the Bears getting the job done, and hopefully the Eagles. Look, lots of time. The people were saying shit about them at this time last year too, and they go on to win the Super Bowl. So all good stuff. Let's break it down, though. Let's get into it as we usually do. You've mentioned it. A couple things on this slate, Alex, out of the gate. One, weather. weather's a big talking point, which also leads, we go down the lane, like we say, weather leads to typically where that ownership is going, which then leads to the common build. What are you sort of seeing, putting all those pieces together early on how it's sort of formulating the ownership on this slate, which then we'll get to the common build after? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think right off the bat, Houston seems like it's going to be the most popular stack. And the reason for this is honestly kind of clear. It's like you look around the slate, and number one, as we said, there's a bit of it's going to be hard to go find that really good value, right? And so what do people like to do when that's the case? They like to correlate their value. Okay, well, Higgins has been solid for them. Christian Kirk has been solid. So 3,900, 3,400. Now you've got Nico Collins at 6,700, who we all know has the same ceiling that, Smith and Jigba and Puka, who are going to get plenty of ownership, have. So I think people go there. And the other big part about that is we talked about how much potential weather there is. This is one of the, I think it might even be the only indoor game. If it's not, it's one of two or three. So you just get kind of like a perfect storm here. People need the value. People want the one indoor turf game. And what does that lead to? It leads to a lot of ownership for CJ Stroud. So he's also at a bit of a discounted price tag because he just missed a couple weeks. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the first thing. And it not only tells us where ownership is going, but it also tells us just how hard it is to find really good game environments and really good stacks elsewhere if Houston is suddenly the most popular passing stack.
Yeah, too many. These aren't even full on Tambo tangents, but just know it's like I always want to put these back out there because people say I heard this before or whatever. But like one thing is a factor for sure. Weather wise, when you look at it, yes, there is a couple of games out there. You can go check it out and find the weather and see it. But a lot of the games that are being targeted or ticketed as like, oh, this could be a weather game, check back at game time. We're talking about like 10-mile-an-hour winds, like maybe some light rain. These are not bad spots. People just automatically go to the team total and say, well, these have bad team totals. Go look again. They all do. Almost every game does. And then this is my tangent part of reminding people that point totals don't always equal the fantasy points scored. If you can find the fantasy points within the game, a team could put up 14 points, but that could be a running back that has 2 touchdowns on the ground and 150 yards. Yep. I don't care if they only scored 14 points. You probably need that running back, and they were affordable, or they made it work, or they were just a piece that's needed because of how bad the scoring was. So remember, it's the best week possible to ignore that. And just a little side note, you and I were talking pre-show, and I know we're going to spend time on, as we always do, it's on single entry focus. But for those with like a portfolio out there, if there was ever a week where you're saying, okay, I hate picking Josh Allen's guys because he's in a good spot this week, it's hard to get him right. Well, if there was ever a week in a portfolio to just get Josh Allen in there a bunch and find a bunch of different opportunities, it would be a week like this where you're struggling with all the other stuff that's out there. So things like that you can do that are just a little bit different ways that you can switch it up on a slate like this, I think are important to consider, remember, and think about when you're out there building. The interesting part about that, Alex, is when you reverse engineer it backwards to what we're here to talk about in single entry, it's like, well, that doesn't really help me because it's Josh Allen and who? And we might not have the Coleman news I don't think we will until inactives come out, like, hour and a half before that game. They brought on Brandon Cooks, which probably means nothing, but just putting it all together can be tricky. And in single entry, you get one shot. Any extra thoughts on things along those lines before we hop into sort of going position by position and what we see?
The last thing I'll say about weather is we should give a reminder that, now that the weather's colder, everything matters just a little bit more. So, 10 to 15 miles per hour of wind is literally nothing at all. When it's warm out, 10, 15 miles an hour, you start to see a little bit of a decline in passing offense, passing efficiency when it's really cold. And then anything above that, it all compounds, right? Like very small things compound together to be a little bit impactful. So just something to keep in mind, and a reminder to also look at the weather. Cause that also means 10 to 15 miles an hour in Miami is not going to be the same as the 10 to 15 that we saw in Philly or something like that. Right. So something to keep in mind, but I think you said it really well too. It's like, it's really not about the median outcome. It's not about what's the most likely way that this game plays out. It's what's the full range of outcomes. And a lot of these bad weather games still have really good upper and range of outcomes from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, somebody said it earlier in the chat, and I agree with it for sure. On weeks like this, and that's what you and I talk about, why we like it. If it, again, may not even be a lower scoring slate, but if it was, and if it ever will be, the reason we love those so much is because then it becomes a lot more of a construction thing. It's not like is it likely to hit, or is it projected as well to hit on the medium projection? Probably not. But is it built in a way that if it goes our way and the ceiling side of it hits, we're just so much further separated from the field? That's what matters. And you just have to be willing to lose. Like we talked about on Thanksgiving on a short slate. It's really all slates, but on slates like this specifically, where there's uncertainty and all that, remember, people are just naturally built to move towards the certainty, meaning whatever they hear people saying or whatever, oh, well, that game's a little bit risky, I don't want to do that. Go with it. I go the other side of that always. And that's why, again, it's not how often you're right. It's how much you win when you are right. Shout out to my boy Title. That's a good one that he says all the time. And that's key on a slate like this. So I'm going to flip it up a little bit this week, just because it's kind of the slate that we have at hand. And I'm just curious, because you said you didn't update this morning on ownership, and you talked about Stroud getting the steam. And I agree 100% on that. What other quarterbacks specifically are you seeing for single entry? Because we know that's going to sort of bleed into the rest. Running back will be its own conversation, but what else are you seeing there at quarterback that's sort of going to lead to the stacks we see?
The only other two that I see that could end up being like, let's say 15% are Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert. The advantage to Tyrod is pretty clear and obvious. Number one, like we just saw Bryce Young win a slate against Atlanta, so people love that aspect of it. But then also Tyrod has two of the absolute cheapest wide receivers that you could possibly pair with him, Mechie and Adonai Mitchell. And the other advantage to that stack is it seems pretty clear, like if you are going to stack Tyrod, if the Jets do produce through the air, it's pretty much going to be those two guys, maybe Mason Taylor as well. But people could mix him in. So regardless of how you're stacking Tyrod, it's like the cheapest thing imaginable. So anyone who wants to go get, Achane and McCaffrey and Puka and JSN, the Jets are kind of the way to do it.
Yeah, I'm curious too, just looking now. We always tie this together and sort of it bleeds into each other and blends, but I don't see a lot of love for Bijan right now. I don't know if it's because Tyler Algier has been getting in the mix so much lately, or like we've seen that type of thing where people are sort of scared of it a little bit. I think that's interesting because he would fit that stack, but also be a ceiling piece that could happen on the other side that would blend into that. And then it's also interesting that I see Breece Hall's ownership up there quite a ways as well. And I don't know if it's because originally people thought they were going to go that way instead of Tyrod. It's because you can obviously afford them all together. How do you sort of see those pieces blending into the mix of that one? Because we talked a little bit on Stroud already, and he'll sort of be talked about more when we get to wide receiver with Higgins and Collins and those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Breece as the second most popular play on the slate, probably going to get to 30%, maybe even higher in high stakes stuff. I think Bijan is going to be up there among the running backs, but I only have him at 19.4% in single entries right now. The main reason for that is I have Devon Achane as just absurdly owned. So we've got 58.2% for Achane single entry ownership this week, going to be really, really high. And again, that's just kind of a product of there are no obvious spots for offenses. New Orleans, pretty good matchup for running backs. And Achane has kind of done it against everyone. And the thing with Achane is like, he obviously is game script independent because of how much he does in the receiving game. But this is one of the only times where we can actually, somewhat confidently say Achane's going to have a game script where he should be force fed over and over and over again. And they're not going to have to try to push the ball downfield. They're not going to have to try to just drop back and throw all the time. So, the chance that he breaks off another explosive run is a little bit higher just because he's going to get more carries in this one than what we've seen in a lot of games where he's kind of been game scripted out in that way. So I think people are really going to flock to him. He's also a little bit cheaper than the other like real studs on the slate, like the Jonathan Taylors and JSN. So part of the reason why Bijan's quote unquote only 20-ish% is because so many people are going to go to Achane.
Right. And I love that, by the way. That's the best part. The way you said it is actually perfect too, because people are like, oh, he's 20%. So many people actually see it as the other way. Like he's chalk, right? They just assume at 20%. It's like 80% is not playing him. And when he's 18 to 20 in the higher dollar, smaller field, or even just smaller field stuff in general, like we're talking about single entry here, that matters when the other guy is 40 to 50 at the $200 more in a different spot, obviously. But just looking at it from that perspective, you can build differently. What if you had a Tua build, right? With Tua and the pass catchers with Robinson. It's like now you're saying I'm taking the dude that was going to be Achane there for that price. I'm putting Bijan, but I'm flipping it and I'm putting Miami passing attack around it, where even though, yes, there may be a little ownership attached, it's not anywhere near the 40 to 50% you're going to see on HN. So little things like that. We'll circle back. We're going to continue circling around some of these positional stuff that we see that are forming the common build. Somebody mentioned the Breece Hall, the cash carryover. Yes. I think there's also something interesting to it when we usually do this in the second segment, just giving some of these ideas now. But like, if you wanted to go Tyrod, you still can. It's just you might have to go like Tyrod, Breece, one of Mitchell and Mechie with Mason Taylor, or skip the wide receivers where most are going with Taylor, go Taylor, Hall, Taylor, and do it that way, right? And you skip around and you can get Breece Hall in there with the quarterback and the tight end, none of those cheap wide receivers that most are using to make it all work, and then make some decisions within that game on the other side. So definitely think there's some interesting ways to go there. Another one, this one kind of bleeds back to the Herbert mention at quarterback, is, are you seeing Gadsden getting as much steam as I am right now at tight end? Like, is that sort of what you're seeing?
Yeah, I've got him and he and Kyle Pitts right at 19% leading the way at tight ends. It could go either way here, and I think one of the big factors in ownership is how many people actually go to Herbert. If Herbert gets to 15%, Gadsden might get to 25 or 30. If Herbert stays down at 8 or 9%, then Gadsden might be as low as 10 to 15. So there's a really wide range of outcomes on the ownerships at tight end this week. I think it's probably like the least certain I've been for a kind of overall position group in quite a while on these main slates.
Well, what I see, this is what's interesting about it, is like, it's the wide receivers for the Chargers are kind of being held in check. So it really, to me, it's funny. It's like I think the Herbert steam depends on the Gadsden steam, like almost how we've seen in the past with like a defense pushing up a running back, or a running back bringing up a defense later on. It's like, that's the situation here, is it feels like nobody really is in love with anybody at tight end. We don't have the situation where, right now when they move McBride up to 7,800 and Harrison's coming back and all this, that was sort of announced before this. It was expected anyway, but it looks like he's going to be good to go off the appendicitis or whatever. So just looking for Arizona, McBride at 7,800 is not the same as McBride at 6,800 and super appetizing when nobody else is on the slate that anybody cares about. If Gadsden does continue to be popular and steam up, that just leads to it. And it kind of is this. Shout out to my guy Kenny again, but he said Tyrod, Breece, stop is fine too. And assume they run. That's really all they want to do. I actually agree 100%. What I think, though, just my opinion, and doing some builds beforehand, it's not easy to stop. It's like, you go for one of those chocolate chip cookies during the holiday season, like, I could have another one. It's the holidays. It's like, as soon as you get the opportunity to put one of Mechie or Mitchell in there, you're like, man, now I can really get it all. And hopefully that's different enough. So I think people have trouble setting that limit, Alex, of putting that stop and just saying one cookie limit. They want to go back for the second. And that's the tricky part, because it makes everything look really good and it still correlates. And that's what people want. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, or anything more that you think I'm missing. Maybe defense we could hit on quickly, but add on. But anything else you see or anything else you want to bring up there?
Yeah, two things there. The first on the Charger stuff, I do think QJ and Ladd could get ownership to 15%ish if Herbert stacks become popular. I think what we're seeing is most Herbert stacks would be Herbert, Gadsden, and one of the receivers. And because of that, you can't get any of those receivers to like mega chalk or anything close to that. It could mean that the smarter way to do it is either triple stack or just double with receivers and go Ladd and QJ. But I think the most popular is going to be Herbert, QJ, and Gadsden, because then you have both of those pass catchers under $5,000, and you're turning a Herbert stack, which feels like it's one of the more expensive stacks because Herbert is typically expensive, and you're turning it into one of the cheaper stacks on the slate with those pass catchers. So I could see that being pretty popular, and that would get brought back. Probably with either Gen T, or maybe people would go double tight end with Bowers. You could also then do, Herbert, QJ, Ladd, and now Bowers is the obvious bring back. And you're saying, okay, well, what if Bowers really separates from the tight end position, which means Gadsden doesn't do a whole lot. So that would make sense. The other thing I'd say on the Jet stuff, this is not a slate where I want to mess with something like Tyrod and Breece and stop, because what we're saying when we talk about this slate being potentially a lot more low scoring is it's going to be harder to find all of the one-offs that just hit in succession, right? And so if that's the case, you don't want to build a lineup that relies on your ability to hit one one-off after another. You want as much correlation as you can get. So if anything, I'd go the opposite direction and I'd overstack and I'd say not just Tyrod, Mitchell, and Mechie, but also give me Breece Hall. And now if the Jets happen to be one of the higher scoring offenses on the slate, which ordinarily is really, really unlikely on this slate, it wouldn't be totally shocking. Now you're really kind of cooking with gas.
Yeah, I could see it a couple different ways. One, I see like, especially from a just like start off point and get it right for 10,300. I mean, this won a Millie Maker with Justin Fields and Breece Hall earlier in the season when I had this exact conversation. And I had those two. It was myself, Squirrel Patrol, and Mayo were talking about it. They weren't as high on it either, but I was like, you're getting two for, 10.3K. I think you could do that, but then you don't have to figure it out. But to your point, like there's also so many scenarios here. I think like Tyrod, Mechie, Mitchell, Taylor, and then use Bijan on the other side. And that's 5 spots you get to bury. And it's like, that's just not how other people are playing it. It double leverages Breece with like the Breece ownership, spread out amongst a 4-man, like a triple with Taylor. It's still super affordable because 43, 38, 36, and 33 for 4 guys. And even if you didn't put Bijan in there, I'm just saying, if you wanted to speed it up, I would. I'd kind of do it that way. You could do something else. You'd have room for for Mooney if you wanted. If you wanted the triple M's, right? The Millie Maker mix down. You got Mechie, Mitchell, Mooney right up the middle. So you get the M stack up the middle, and then you could do it that way. I mean, there's a few different ways you could do it, but that's going to be the way to get different on this slate, is to just go a little bit further than the certainty of others out there where they say, I think this is the case. You're going to say, yeah, it could be, but I think it's going to go even further, and I'm not going to mess around with a bunch of different games. Last couple things before we get to the next box. We're already kind of getting into the ways that we could leverage the common build here. Is what is your take on Jonathan Taylor? He got a price drop this week, $200 less. He's not 10K anymore. He's 9,800. But if you look from the spot, he is in that Houston game. It can work. What's sort of your thoughts on that? Just as a running back one-off, or to make that game stack work? How are you seeing it?
I don't really have much interest here. Houston is just such a good defense. You're relying on the explosive plays. You're relying on a lot of touchdown equity, and I just don't know that they can score enough to give Taylor that opportunity. Houston is one of the best defenses in football, and the one thing that they have been slightly vulnerable to is explosives. So it's not like the worst idea in the world to go to Jonathan Taylor, but we're talking about one of the absolute best defenses in the league and probably the best from a success rate standpoint. So it's not going to be for me. But if I was stacking Houston, it makes a little bit more sense. He breaks the 80-yarder. Now it forces Stroud to throw a little bit more. It gets him the ball right back. So at least the correlation aspect makes a lot of sense within a game stack there, but no interest for me other than that.
Okay, and then only other place we didn't really touch on, we said we'd circle back to it just because, we talked a little bit about Nico Collins and Higgins fitting that build and people being comfortable with that. I guess for right now, you could say, like, I could see a lot of builds that have like Stroud. Maybe it's Higgins just as much, or I mean, overall, I think you see more on Collins, but I'm saying it's just the Higgins part will just make so much sense because he fits it and he's cheap. So I could see that. But if you put those two, it's going to be Breece Hall, Achane, and then sort of move around from there. And then we've already hit on some of those spots on how we can leverage them. We'll go through that in segment number 2. But is there other stuff at wide receiver that you're seeing, like Puka versus JSN, the Waddle stuff? Is there other things that you're seeing at the wide receiver spot that you think will be important to touch on here?
Well, I think let's just stay with this Houston offense for a second, because Indianapolis on the year has been one of the worst matchups possible for wide receiver ones, 4.4 fantasy points per game below those wide receiver 1 averages. They've been great for wide receiver 2s and other wide receivers, plus 6.1 fantasy points per game and plus 3.9. That's according to our DVOA adjusted fantasy points against data over at FTN. The problem is now Sauce Gardner's in town and Travarius Ward is back. And so I no longer feel confident attacking them with the quote-unquote wide receiver 2, which is probably Higgins for Houston. I guess I'd still be a little bit confident in the wide receiver 3, call it Christian Kirk. The problem is it's just now so much easier for them to defend the entire field than it was when only one cornerback, Travarius Ward, was really good. So I'm a little bit hesitant, and personally, like I just think this is a kind of an easy fade, not just from an ownership perspective, but also I think we can do better from an expectation standpoint, which is why this is the kind of slate I love, because we actually get chalk that I think is a lot more fragile than most of the chalk that we've seen this year. So yeah, I kind of think that's where I'd start, and then also makes Nico Collins a pretty rough play. And we actually have Nico Collins as one of the most popular wide receiver plays on the slate. I mentioned earlier, like I think people are going to come down a little bit from Puka and JSN just because those are big price tags, $9,000 and $9,500 on a slate where it's not easy to find value. So going to a wide receiver one that you feel like he has the same upside as a $9,000 receiver, but you're getting him for $6,700, that seems like a very prototypical move that the field is going to make.
Yeah, and our man Nades, he was in it on your point earlier too, kind of nails it again. I mean, the overstacks have been crushing. You've been on this all season long. We've been on them for leverage lane pieces at the end. It could be again today, but just noting it, it's like a lot of people, even though they're going to correlate well and feel good about what they're doing, there is going to be like a 1, 2, 3 stop, secondary 1, 2, secondary 1, 2, defense fits. Oh, and they correlate with the running back. Oh, it feels really good, but then it could just be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, and that kind of finishes the job if people get what I'm saying. So like that's kind of the setup I'm seeing as well. And again, will it feel it should feel good on paper because you're like, it's not like you want to feel completely comfortable, but I'm saying you're overstacked, but you're like, at least I'm still in a good spot. It's just, that's going to be the thing where when others are like, oh, I got 2 of the 3 pieces right, but, or 2 pieces right, but I needed 3 or 4 pieces there. It's like, I missed on the other 2 or whatever it might be. That's kind of how we look at that. Just of note too, I'm skipping ahead again, but I actually don't think the Colts D is that bad at 3,100. If you're talking about just leveraging Houston completely, like you said about some of the other stuff and what they have available there, I know on paper it might not look as good, but in general, could definitely be a spot there, especially if they can pick off those other wide receiver spots. It's like, okay, throw to Christian Kirk. Let's see how that works out for you, and we'll take our chances. Let's see how that looks. You never know. That could be a good setup there.
Yeah, I like that call for sure.
Anything else at the like JSN versus Puka versus some of the higher price guys, or anything else there that you wanted to mention? They both look like they're being at least a little bit held in check, but obviously people will be able to spend up. People really struggled with the 9K and above price tag on JSN last week, and obviously killed them. But you were dead on with that one. He's 9,500 here. Again, his bad games look like most people's ceiling games, so that's the key with him. And then I guess just to mention the Puka situation, I don't know. Like, he's 9K and people seem scared. I know there shows the ownership, but I wonder if these Devontae Adams touchdowns are worrying people more and more as they see him continue to get, 5 touchdowns in in very limited yardage. He's just getting the short yardage touchdowns. But any thoughts?
So let's talk about JSN for a second. I think this is a really good conversation to have. When we talk about the JSN game last week being a good call, I think it's important to realize, like, what made that a good call was not that I thought JSN is going to have a huge game today and we should play him. It's that I was correct about the ownership. I had the ownership at 10% or below. He came in at like 8% in a lot of single entries, especially in higher stakes stuff. That's the part that was really impactful to be right, because then it's not a question of what is JSN going to do. There's just no reason for a guy with this much upside, for this probability of a 30-point game, a 35-point game, a 40-point game, like we actually saw. There's no reason for that guy to be this low owned. If he had been 20% owned last week, I wouldn't have been on it, because again, I was not predicting a 40-point performance. I wasn't saying he's going to have a great game. I was saying this guy's so productive. He has such a high probability of having that really good game that he shouldn't be this low owned. Mm-hmm. This week, we've got him projected at 19% in single entries. And I think I'm one of the few who's actually projecting him below the Puka ownership. I've got Puka at 21, JSN at 19. I think a lot of people are kind of the other way around. But so for me, like, they're just both at a point where it's a little bit higher than I want, and I'd rather build a more balanced lineup, or I'd rather go to an expensive running back, something like that. So I don't think I'm going to be on either of these guys, but it's also a case where right now they're both projected around 20. What happens if tonight or tomorrow morning that changes to one of the guys is going to be under 15%, the other is going to be 25 to 30? Well, now I have suddenly a lot of interest in the guy who I think is going to be lower.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna have to wait and see. Like you said, we'll know more over the weekend here. It's just Saturday morning, but we'll get some more details and upside on the ownership information. But it doesn't look like anyone's really stacking them. That'd be my standout point. I don't know if do you have anything else you want to talk about? If not, we could start going through some of these ways to leverage the common build. I think we're pretty clear on what that looks like now from just breaking it down. If any weren't following, it's clearly the Houston stuff as far as the Stroud passing attack, maybe some Tyrod, maybe some Herbert. The stuff that fits in, someone who doesn't play Herbert necessarily might still play a Gadsden as a spot there to get a piece of that. And then it's Breece Hall. You're going to have Achane. You're going to have, some of those other guys that we talked about up the middle as far as wide receivers go, if they got the money to spend. But one thing I was going to add just to those higher priced wide receivers, I think you've got it right. Puka ahead of JSN as far as ownership goes. JSN much higher than last week because people will just, which is a product of the previous point as well, by the way. When people aren't overstacking necessarily, unless they go to the cheaper overstacks, I don't know if they'll have the money, or that's how they will spend their money, is like 1, 2, 3, cheap enough, 1, 2, cheap enough, and then I can fit JSN, and they'll feel good about that build versus the overstack that can still fit them as a one-off and do it that way. But I was just going to add, I don't see Darnold or Stafford getting very much ownership right now. Again, price is important and all of that, but if those receivers have their bigger games, it's always nice to have the quarterback attached, especially if you have so much uncertainty on the slate. Why not do it that way, where that could be what leads to it, and those could be 25 to 30 point outputs for the quarterback that goes with them. Anything to add on that one? And if not, some other ways you see to leverage the common build now?
Not on that specifically, but one last thing on the common build I think that's worth noting is, remember that one of the three quarterbacks that we just talked about there is potentially being really popular is Tyrod Taylor. And so anyone who decides, no, I want Stroud, or no, I want Herbert instead of the Tyrod stack, well, they now become even more likely to go choose Breece Hall. So for me, I think the common build is a Stroud double, probably Nico Collins involved in that, and then Achane, and let's throw Breece Hall in there as well. Yeah. So that to me is what we're leveraging. It's the Stroud double or the Herbert double with Achane and Breece Hall.
Yes, I like that call quite a bit. And that's where even I think it's interesting because that's where I said I see like the Gadsden stuff can even still get into that, because if people are going, it could be Collins with Higgins and then stopping it there, but then that still leaves a tight end block open to it for a onesie position. It's like, well, if I'm not on Tyrod, I throw Breece Hall on the running back. If I'm not on Herbert, I throw Gadsden into the tight end spot. And these are just, like you said, it's very fragile chalk, which sounds like an oxymoron this season, because it's been like, every time it feels like it, but we've shown plenty of times where it's like, man, the end of the day, there's been a lot of weeks where 3 chalk pieces smashed and 3 did not. So you kind of got to look at it from that perspective as well. Yeah. And Nate said, this is still CJ Stroud. Let's talk about the indie stuff. Any thoughts on this one? Kenny's got some good stuff here too. Your JSN thought from last week. I liked how you framed it up, because again, so many people go off calls based on results oriented things. It wasn't, like you said, when you get him in there at 8%, it's not really a matter of what he's going to do. He's JSN. It's what is he going to do and how much is that going to matter? Well, massive amounts when 92% of the field doesn't have him. It's such a massive separator with someone who has the probability, like you said, of putting up such a high ceiling. And that's what makes a ton of sense. Do you have any thoughts on the CMC spot right out of the gate here? Because Kenny brings up a good point. And at 9,300, the way people are spending this week, it looks like people are spending that money at wide receiver if they're going to.
I think the idea is really sound. And I do agree that I think McCaffrey is going to be 10%, kind of right in that JSN range from last week. Also in the range that we really nailed Gibbs a few weeks ago against Washington when he had that 40-point explosion. So we've got a really good track record of finding these 10% super studs. But I don't think McCaffrey is going to be that guy for me this week. And one of the main reasons is you just kind of look through what he has done this season. His success is incredibly correlated to the strength of the matchup, right? Like his only 2 bad games, the Rams, one of the best defenses in the league, 17.6. Houston, one of the best defenses in the league. We just talked about this with Jonathan Taylor, 9.8 fantasy points that game. Cleveland is a really, really difficult matchup. They're an excellent defense. And to me, it doesn't mean that like they're going to be able to shut down McCaffrey. They're going to be able to take away what he does. It's just those, 15, 20-yard receptions become 5 to 10-yard receptions. The likelihood that he breaks a 20-yard run or a 17-yard run and turns that into a touchdown just goes way down. So I just think his outlook is a lot lower this week than most. And in particular, like it's not necessarily his median outcome that's moving a ton. It's the ceiling outcome that's moving a ton. So I'm not going to be super interested in him at 9,300. I don't think that also, I believe, is one of the actual worst weather games. Was that correct, Tambo?
You're looking for the weather now. And it's just, it says right now, a decent chance for some rain, sustained winds around 20 miles an hour, gusts pushing up to 35. So I don't know if you think that's going to affect for, in Cleveland too, like you said, colder and all of that can definitely be a factor for sure.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that lets this really aggressive Cleveland defense be even more aggressive because they don't have to defend the deep ball as much as they otherwise would. So maybe things aren't quite as open underneath for McCaffrey, but more than anything else, like it just changes the overall scoring environment, right? Like McCaffrey, because he's such a massive part of the offense, his production is going to very closely mirror the production of the offense overall. So if you cut the scoring in half from the San Francisco offense compared to what they've done in recent games, well, that's going to have a similar effect on McCaffrey's expected fantasy points. So I really like the concept. I really like the idea of just finding, hey, who's one of the guys with 35% or with 35-point upside who's going to be 10% or below. McCaffrey obviously fits that bill this week. So if anyone wants to play it, I'm not going to be opposed to that whatsoever. It's just probably not going to be where I'm going to go because I don't think the outlook is that good this week.
And again, focusing on the fact that we're talking about single entry, specific, you can do, it's not that you can't do that. Obviously you can do that. Like you just said, you get them at a low ownership. You have the opportunity for 35 plus. Definitely. It's just like Alex says, not his spot this week, but you could do it. But I mean, in a portfolio, I'm definitely mixing him in. Like somebody said, he could have 10 catches this week, and that stuff can really rack up. He's completely different than those around him. Most that have somebody, even if they are going in that range, not saying this can be a higher ownership. It might be though, just because it correlates with the Stroud stuff. But I think more spending up all the way past Achane and Robinson and those guys go to JT because he fits the Higgins with Collins, with Stroud, with all of that. So I think one of the interesting thing about that, just talking about in how to leverage the common build, just staying on that topic quickly, is obviously you could go to like JT and the defense, but like I said earlier, I'd be fine with just the defense because I don't know that, going with Stroud, Collins, Higgins, and adding Kirk or Schultz, and then adding, Alec Pierce on the run back. Is that a way to get different within the same game? Yes, because less likely people have those spots, but so many of them are so similar. And I'm more likely to bank on the fact that it doesn't go off or is not needed than I am of trying to overstack or, go extra on this one. I don't know. That's just my thoughts right now. Anything to add on sort of the overstack within this most popular spot versus trying to find ways to just avoid it and get the points elsewhere?
So I think one thing I'll mention is I do think Schultz will be somewhat popular, especially within Stroud stacks. But yes, if I were going that route, I would be overstacking because what you're saying there is, okay, why is CJ Stroud separating? Because they have to throw the ball all game. They're able to do so pretty effectively. They're the one game indoors. And so like the likelihood that Stroud only supports 2 pass catchers is just fairly low. And especially if you didn't want Nico Collins, like if you went Stroud, Higgins, Kirk, Schultz, that makes a lot of sense. The bring back is a little bit more complicated because I kind of think like all of the Indianapolis guys are either overpriced or slightly overowned just for the matchup. It is such a difficult matchup. And Indianapolis is such a high-powered offense that we really don't need them to outproduce their expectations at all for Houston to be pushed offensively, to be in a situation where they have to throw the ball. So it's a weird spot where like I don't think the correlation is as strong as usual to use a bring back. I probably would try to use one regardless, but man, like Warren's going to be 10%, Pierce is going to be around 10%. Those are kind of the 2 guys that I would have gravitated to otherwise. The low-owned guys seem like Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Downs. So maybe I'd go Downs and just hope he's the best 4,200 guy just because he catches a touchdown or something like that. But yeah, it's a really kind of tough decision on who to bring it back with. But I do think it's a fairly straightforward decision that if you're going to use Stroud, you should be triple stacking.
And this too, I mean, we just saw JT last week. I said it last week too. It's like you can go bet it. Like if you want, like even the books don't have the fade. He's 85.5 is his rush prop right now, and he's minus 200 anytime touchdown, which for him has been kind of worse, right? It's actually been worse. I mean, it's been the odds we've seen on that have been a lot crazier. So it's like if you like it, you can get almost plus 300 on 100 yards and an anytime touchdown. You could bet that. Still not need him in DFS and get a nice little 3-to-1 action there. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, just little things that I'm always considering is like, I'm not that scared of it, even though I get it. Like with the ownership, it's just not going to be something that I'm super high on in the stacks, like I say, or whatever, however the portfolio shakes out. But for single entry, it won't be for me. It won't be somewhere where I'm going there.
He has hit in a big way against a really good defense already this year. He had 32.5 against Denver way back in week 2. But since then, he hasn't had many difficult matchups, but 14.6 versus the Rams, 7.7 versus Pittsburgh. More on that in a little bit. And then 8.6 against Kansas City. So the defenses that are capable of really stopping an explosive rusher so far have kind of really held him in check. With the only really big game that he's had against a great defense was that Denver game all the way back in week 2.
Man, the little don't think I don't hear those little teasers that you put in there. And I know what you're doing. You're cooking something up over there, and I got something to go with that maybe. So we'll see. That's going to be fun when we get to the end. I do want to look at a few more spots, though, before we get there. One that's been a common theme throughout. Waddle is getting a little bit of ownership for sure, right? I'm seeing it at least. That's like even though HN is as well, but I'm actually not seeing many looking at Tua. That's almost a 24-point team total at home in Miami going against the Saints defense. I know that it's been easier to run on them than pass on them, but do you see anything there with just being able to leverage HN, whether it's with Tua together, where it's $4,900, like Tua's cheap this week, and then you have Waddle, and then you have Malik Washington, you got Dulcich, you got those guys. Is there anything you're seeing there where you could see this being a spot that people, can get away with or that you like with the Miami Dolphins pass attack?
You have that like no Mahomes rule. I pretty much have a no Tua rule, but this does seem like a decent spot to try it if you're ever going to do it. Just kind of a comical note here. I keep clicking on guys and like looking through their stuff just to, have a good response prepared. And every single guy I click on, I look through their results, and by far their best game came against Atlanta. So maybe the move is to go Tyrod this week and finally get that Adonai Mitchell breakout, because they just keep allowing so much production and so many ceiling performances from all kinds of different players.
Well, you don't got to tempt me with a good time, man. Like the Bijan stuff stands out to me, and I just think that'd be a way to really speed this game up quick. Everyone's always afraid of Tyler Algier, and I get it, he gets in, but it's always the same shit anyway. It's like if he gets the first touchdown, everyone's tilted, but if Bijan gets 2 and then Algier gets 1, it's like, man, how does this happen? It's like it's just the same thing backwards. I always use the golf thing, right? The bogey free round. I think I've told you this one before, but it's like that to me is the one that stands out. If somebody makes a bogey, then gets 7 birdies, a streak, and an eagle, everyone praises them. If they get 7 birdies, a streak, and an eagle, and then bogey the last hole, like, what a POS. This guy's terrible. Lost the bogey free round. Like, what a loser. And it's like he just put up the same score, just in a different outcome. So people always freak out. At the end of the day, you can run on the Jets. I think it's very possible that we see a good Bijan game, and I kind of like overstacking Tyrod with his pass catchers. And again, that's just my thoughts on that spot. Keep going here. Another one that was brought up, Alex, is the Trevor Lawrence game style. I know, like, for people that don't know, in this segment, we're sort of going through some of the combos that you can do and ways to get different and that sort of stuff. That is a bigger team total on the road for the Jags. It is Trevor Lawrence. You are accepting that risk, but there is pass catching options there. So anything with that stack in mind, and do you even need a run back from Tennessee? Do you got to sort of hope they do something to stay in this game to make it go back and forth? But any thoughts on this one?
So when I'm doing ownership, one of the things that I do is I ask myself, like, first, are people going to be interested in the spot? And then are they going to be interested in the actual plays? And I think that this is one where people are going to be interested in the spot. They're going to see the price tag on Lawrence himself, just $5,400. They're going to see the matchup. And they're going to say, hey, this could be something. And then I think they're going to look and they're going to see Brian Thomas is $6,200. Myers is up to $57. Parker Washington is up to $54. And they're going to say, oh, I don't want that. They've got, like, think about that. They have 3 receivers more expensive than Quinn Johnston and Gadsden. Who do we think people are going to be more interested in playing? I think it's going to be QJ and Gadsden. So I don't see a ton of steam coming on Jacksonville. Maybe that's a reason to then go play Jacksonville, because, if they hit in a big way, it doesn't matter a ton that they're 62, 57, and 54 compared to if they were 57, 52, and 49 or something like that. But I think they're too expensive. I don't really like Trevor Lawrence. I just think he's not that good of a quarterback. He makes a lot of really good throws, but also has a lot of misses, kind of similar to Caleb Williams in that way, honestly. But the other issue here is the main thing that we have seen from Jacksonville, especially over the last few weeks, is they want to run the ball. They want to be a heavy run-first offense, and they're running the ball pretty well. We need Tennessee to push them for Lawrence to really hit. And what are the odds that Cam Ward pushes them, considering they actually have a good defense themselves? So this stack is definitely not for me. I'd have more interest in going to ETN or something like that. And I think ETN's a decent play at $6,500. The problem is we just don't know what the split is going to look like. If we could confidently say that the split is going to be as good for him as it was last week, I'd be in on him. But it's just so often like, oh, now here's Tootin, and now Tootin's getting all the red zone touches, and it's been really tough with ETN and figuring them out. Last week seemed like an aberration where it was so heavily ETN, and it might have just been because the first drive he had, I think it was a 45-yard run and a receiving touchdown, and they just said, oh, I guess he's the hot hand today, and they stuck with him all game.
There's going to be a couple spots like that. I mean, we get to Pittsburgh later. Someone's mentioned already in the chat about just go to Warren. Well, then Gainwell's been involved. Kind of depends on how and the other thing is too, the one that I always love to remind people of is like, it's last week, it's all season, it's whatever. It's whatever. Nothing to do with last week has anything to do with tomorrow, right? Could it? Yes. In the end, will you be able to lean back on it? See, I told you it was going to be this guy because it was him last week. You could say that, but you don't know until it happens, right? That's kind of the setup of it all. People would have thought Loveland, it was Kmet. People would have thought it was all Swift, not Manungai, but Manungai was in the mix too. Swift had an awesome game, but so did Manungai had a great game. It's like you can see all kinds of different guys show up with that. So from that perspective, I think it's definitely interesting. And then the other part when Kenny said this is you talked about the prices of the wide receivers. They see like Gadsden, Quentin Johnston. They see Tyrod Taylor's pass catchers. They're like, man, I could just play wide receiver 1s and 2s in other spots that are still good and get away with it for less. And then, oh, by the way, Trevor Lawrence checks notes. He sucks. Yeah, that's the key. So they definitely remember that as well. What other spot was I looking at? Somebody mentioned earlier the Darnold spot with JSN. You kind of had your JSN conversation already, but I guess if you were going there, I'd have no fault of putting in, Darnold into the mix with it. Like I mentioned, the interesting part is he's not really getting dragged along. I feel similar like that about Stafford. The problem is like with Stafford, I'll force it in my portfolio because I'm fine with it. It'll just make you more unique. But it's really hard to get like him, Puka, Adams, and a good lineup, and then picking if you wanted to run it back, which Carolina guy, but most will just say Ted. Well, he's 6,100, so it's not like he's free or anything like that. And, it's tricky that way. But obviously pairing Puka up with Stafford could be good. And then just trying to see down the board here. We could save the Bills and the Steelers for after. Is there anything else that I'm missing, Alex, or any other spots you want to touch on quick?
I don't think so. Let's see. I think we mentioned Tua a little bit. I do think it's very viable to flip that and go with Shuck. Pending Olave status, if Olave actually misses this game, he's questionable with a back injury. Back injuries can be a little bit tough. If Olave plays, Shuck has at least shown a willingness to really throw the ball downfield. Juwan Johnson, $4,200 seems like a pretty solid play. And the nice thing there is the correlation is great because, whenever he does something, it's a touchdown. So, you're getting that for the quarterback too. The other really nice thing is no Kamara. So chances are they're not going to be able to run the ball and they're going to have to throw the ball. And Miami is not a good defense, even though they've been outperforming expectations over the last few weeks. So I don't think that's a bad route. It's also not going to be like a super contrarian route. There are going to be people who do that. But yeah, this, the only other one that I think is worth mentioning is I'm not totally opposed to going to Brock Purdy and just saying, what if this offense at full strength is good enough to beat whatever defense is on the field? And in this case, because I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball against Cleveland, maybe they get a bunch of explosives through the air. So Kittle, Pearsall with Purdy. That's a little bit interesting. The only problem is now you have to find a Cleveland guy to use as a bring back. But there have also been people in my Discord I know who have talked up Shedeur Sanders stacks, which isn't the craziest idea. The San Francisco defense has been really bad, particularly since the Fred Warner injury. They were a little bit better last week. But Sanders, Fannin, Judy, or Tillman, it's not the worst idea I've ever heard. And again, if you're ever going to try something that seemingly ridiculous, this is a good week to try.
It's just so, yeah, I don't know. He's cheap and so are all his guys. So it's like, whatever, you could just do it instead of Tyrod Taylor. It just doesn't feel as good to people because you are picking between some very random dudes. And then people get worried because they saw Bond had a decent game last game and things like that. Right. So you could definitely move it around that way. I think it's if you wanted to do it, it's probably just, again, especially if you're doing it in single entry, you're probably just saying, I'm hoping I'm right. And you go Sanders, Judy, Fannin, and then probably CMC. And then that's your lane. You're saying, I'm going to go with this is the game. These are the spots. It's CMC, like they said. Do they love him? Maybe not their lane, but he is 10% probably. He can put up 35 plus. He could just get a bunch of checkdowns. It is a good matchup. I would need Sanders and his squad to stay in it for CMC to pay off and get to that ceiling. Therefore, let's try it this way. That's the thought process for me. But again, probably not where I know not where I'm going in single entry at least. So can cross that one off.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm way more interested in the San Francisco side of things. The Cleveland defense, they're really good in DVOA and EPA per play allowed. They're very good in success rate allowed through the air. They are below average, so they allow more than average explosive pass plays. So if there's a way to beat them, it's the explosive pass. And Purdy gives that element to the offense a lot more than Mac Jones. Like you could even argue from a success rate standpoint, they're almost the exact same quarterback. But the explosive pass is way, way, way more likely with Purdy in there. So it wouldn't shock me if Purdy has something like 300 yards, even though he's only thrown 25 times. And if 3 of those happen to be long touchdowns, now you're really in business there.
And we've seen games like that where it's like, that's Purdy's been on Million Maker winners for sure, where it's just built like that. It's like, oh, he just connected with that guy on a 60-yard touchdown, and then he got another catch or two, and then he connected with that guy. And it's like not actually the volume you would expect. It's what you talk about. It's the explosiveness or the value of the volume, right? The volume value, if you will, is what I'm going to say. Darren has one here. I'm curious your thoughts, but it says, would you be more inclined to play 2 running backs? And he said same team. I thought it said same game at first, and I was going to have a conversation around that. Clearly 2 very different things, but on a 10-game slate, would you still be, I guess it would be like Gainwell and Warren together or something along those lines. What's your thoughts on this?
Gainwell Warren, it's interesting you said that, is the one that came to my mind. The first one that came to mind actually was Montgomery Gibbs, and I was like, well, they're not on the slate. But Gainwell Warren, it does make sense because Buffalo has been such an incredible matchup for running backs. We've already seen these guys get like 15 and 20 points together. There is a chance that they go for 20 and 25, and it's just a 45-point explosion from the Pittsburgh running backs. It is more doable, honestly, like this. The only problem is, like, I wish that Warren's price had started to react to the Gainwell usage more than Gainwell's price reacted to the Gainwell usage, right? Like Gainwell's up to 5,300, but Warren's still stuck up there at 63. If we had seen Gainwell kind of, let's see, like he was actually 55 last week, but 41, 43, 45 the 3 weeks prior. If Gainwell was 4,900 and Warren was now down to 55 or something like that, then I think it'd be a lot more doable. But right now they're kind of both priced as though they're going to get the better end of the deal from the usage perspective. So I definitely don't love it. I think it's much better to choose between them, and I don't have a strong feeling between them, but I probably wouldn't play both.
Yeah, I look at slate dynamics, and I mean, like I said, when you get to a 10-game lower scoring, I get where that angle of attack would be approached from and thought about. But I also think there's still plenty of running backs we can play on the slate. Like it's not like the 3-gamer the other day. First of all, it's a smaller slate. It was bigger totals, but there was like no running backs that people loved, right? There was only a few. And so if you did end up going like a Gibbs Montgomery route, I could see how you got there. And there's so many value plays at wide receiver, et cetera, even shorter slate. All those factors matter. But when you still have 20 teams to pick from, it's very unlikely that you're going to even get the stack that the running back combo, I should say, that is needed. Get what you need from them and then have them correct in the right place with all the other pieces that go with it from committing to it. And single entry, you got 1 shot. So, I mean, you better get the other 7 spots correct. I'll be looking to spread it out and just find my way that way. All right. I don't see any other questions in here. I think we talked plenty of different ways and game stacks and things like that you can go to. Are you ready to go to your leverage lane? Anything else you want to add before we get to it?
Yeah, I want to ask you a question before we get to the leverage lane. What's your take on Bucky Irving? Because I'm seeing him now sub 5%, and the matchup is phenomenal with Arizona. They really, really can use the spark that he brings to this offense. And I thought the quote from, I think it was Todd Bowles, was pretty interesting, where they said, like, we're going to give Bucky the ball early, and then we're going to see how he looks. And we're going to go with, the hot hand from there between himself, Sean Tucker, and Rachaad White. To me, that says if Bucky comes out and looks like his usual self early on, that we could see like a 50 to 60% total touch share from him, in which case he's got as good a chance as any to break the slate, does he not?
We will find out for certain on Sunday, because he'll definitely be in the mix for sure, and you'll know why in a moment. So,
well, how about that? All right. Well, why don't you kick us off with your leverage lane?
I can go first, actually, at this point. You've segued us there. That's why the show is great. Sometimes it goes this way. Here's the deal. Baker is going to play. They're talking about his protective padding and all this different stuff. I actually think Bucky would be a great guy to fit this mold as well. All I really want in this game is to know if both teams can push the pace. And I definitely think they can. It is a high-paced game. For a two high-paced teams, two very bad pass defenses. Rush defense is not that much better, to be honest. The tricky part is figuring out which guy it's going to be on the Bucs side. So I'm not going to commit to that, but I would love if one of them would do something to keep up. I actually like a pass catcher on that team, though. So my leverage lane is going to be on the opposite side with other guys coming back. He's already been able to push the pace without them. You won't get your cheap Michael Wilsons and whatnot anymore, but I'm going to stay with Brissett. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to fill it out yet because we were waiting on news and how the lineup shakes out and value elsewhere. But what I'm going to commit to is Brissett and Egbuka together. That's the two. I think Egbuka's in a good spot. Again, if the tricky part of Baker is if he goes back out or something like that. Now in the portfolio, I'm playing Baker. Like I'm going to definitely have him. But in my single entry, I think whatever happens in that game can push it enough. It's a decent team. It's a decent game total, decent team totals. Good offenses that are built together, right? You've got opportunities pretty much across the board. They're mostly healthy now with the guys that are coming back. There's some running back situations with like Benson and DeMercado and those guys. So I just think Brissett's going to be able to do enough, open it up. I'm going to go to the Brissett side here and then use Egbuka on the run back. He's at a nice price, 6,500 right in there. And in the portfolio stuff, I don't usually fully, I'm going to say it because I don't care, but I'm definitely going to still play Baker, like Baker, Egbuka, Tez, and then use, somebody from the Arizona side on the opposite. And I think you can still get to McBride here, even with the price boost, because tight end is not that strong. And a lot of the like Gadsden stuff or guys that we're talking about, we didn't talk about a ton, but there's not a ton of good tight ends unless you're just sort of pairing them up with their quarterback. So if you still want a guy that can break the slate at tight end, it would be a guy like Trey McBride. So I like the Bowers call you had earlier, but yeah, I'm in on Brissett and Egbuka for my spot here. What do you got?
I like this. I teased it a little bit. I'm going Josh Allen stacks. And like you, I don't know how I want to stack this just yet. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Part of the problem is I don't even know yet if Keon Coleman's playing. And this is a later game, so we might not have that information in time. Luckily, a lot of these guys are similarly priced. But, man, there's a lot to like here. So let's start with the obvious. We've talked about it a ton this year. Pittsburgh boosts opponent play volume more than anyone else. So we have Buffalo projected for the most offensive plays on the slate by a pretty comfortable margin. The second thing is this Pittsburgh defense has allowed or has been really, really good at taking away explosive running games. James Cook has been really explosive rusher so far this year. We just saw them kind of shut down the Chicago running game, who my Eagles weren't able to do that, and they shut down Jonathan Taylor in that running game. So when they really prioritize stopping the run, they do it well, and they force their opponent to be pass heavy and beat them through the air, where they're still going to be a pretty good defense. They're still going to make plays defensively, but they're also going to give up chunk plays, and they're going to give up a lot of production through the air. We saw that in the Indianapolis game. We saw that in the Chicago game. I think we can see it again here with Josh Allen. We're projecting quite a few explosive pass plays, and all of these pass catchers are cheap. So, I think I want to double this still for the correlation. I really like either of the Pittsburgh running backs as a bring back. Of course, we just see the running back shred Buffalo right now. And these pass catchers are so cheap, whether it's Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman, Gabe Davis, Shavers, all of these guys are mid 3Ks. Shakir 5,500, I think, is the one that I really need to look into. He's basically all yards after the catch, so I want to look into how Pittsburgh has done after the catch. But from just like a pure, volume perspective, Shakir needs volume to get there because he's not running those downfield routes. So it helps that he's playing a team that gives up so much pass volume. So I think Shakir has a good chance of being in there. Kincaid will probably be in there if he suits up and is a full go $4,500 at the tight end position. But I just love the idea on a slate where so many people are playing bad quarterbacks and trying to correlate and just try to find the one really cheap stack that hits. There's a decent chance they all fail. And you're telling me the one like excellent quarterback on the slate who has been one of, if not the best fantasy quarterbacks over the last 3 years, is going to be low owned with cheap pass catchers. So it's not like you're even, paying way up for the stack as a whole. It just seems like a really big inefficiency to me. And I'm going to try to play this slate through Josh Allen.
Yeah, I love that. I like your call too of like the fact of the pricing. We talk about this all the time, how much it matters, but usually that's an issue when you get to Josh Allen. Not only is he expensive, but it's like, who do I stack him with and how much do they cost? This week, we're getting them at very affordable prices. I thought originally that you were going to say James Cook, because I think that's a pretty good spot too. At like 7,600, I'm fine with it. That'll be probably more of a portfolio play for me than in my single entry, but just of note, I like that quite a bit. I love the Josh Allen stack though, and going to have a ton of that. Like I said, even if you are playing a lot of lineups this week, instead of having that fear of missing out and playing, I'm always a proponent of this anyway, of not picking like too many quarterbacks, is tightening up your pool. You could really just take a stand this week and say what you said is, even though they're probably not all going to fail, that's aggressive because there's a lot of games, but enough of them are going to fail most likely. And then it's no saying that everyone else who plays the ones that do get through are in the top 5 most popular stacks. So there's less of those lineups that exist. There's less of them that are going to be correct and come through. You can have a huge majority of your lineups, even in portfolio play, built around Josh Allen and different combinations, and hope to get one that sticks and that's right. So of note, just on the James Cook thing, I will add on there, just if you're not getting that stack and you want to get to him, he has very similar props to Jonathan Taylor. So, I mean, when you're talking about 9,800 versus 76, 88.5 is like the same for the rushing. He's almost 100 all purpose with the receiving stuff that he can get. And he's minus 120, minus 130 in places for a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor, of course, minus 200, but those touchdowns can come in droves for a guy like Cook, who sometimes gets one from a check down from 20 yards out. That would also help Josh Allen. And typically when we're looking at those two, we may not stack them just because the way Josh Allen can take over at the goal line. But when it's 7,500, 7,600, very cheap, like what, 5,900 and below after that for Shakir and below, then you could actually still get away with it on a week like this. So that makes it somewhat interesting as well. I also might change mine here at the very end in a slight way, just saying it because I went back and looked at some of the preliminary. I might not commit to Puka because I'm going to flip the commitment to McBride. I am going to play Brissett and McBride, overpay for McBride. It's just because some lineups will have Tez, some will have Puka. My single entry, I'm not sure. It'll be a combination of like 2v2s and how that looks in the end, but I will commit to McBride instead. So I'm an even bigger price commitment now that I'm putting in on it. So it's Brissett and McBride for me. If Puka works, I love it. If it doesn't in that one, I end up going to Tez or something like you said, whether you want to go to the running back position or something else there, I'll go to that. But definitely in on Brissett and McBride for sure. All right.
I like that change. I think McBride looks like he's going to be really under-owned this week, so I think it's a really good call. And you're just saying, well, all he has to do is keep doing what he's been doing, and he's going to pay off for you in a big way. I want to make one more point on the James Cook thing. This is about like the way that Pittsburgh has defended, and it's not just the games I mentioned. You can also look at the Green Bay game, right? Like Josh Jacobs was held to 13 for 33. Jordan Love threw 37 times for 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. Pittsburgh, especially in the second half of the season, they have approached teams with a really strong run game with the mindset of we're not going to let them run the ball against us. And we know that Buffalo, like when they do what they want to do offensively, it's run the ball. Joe Brady wants to run the ball. And so I'm very much like making the prediction that Pittsburgh takes that approach in this game and actually forces Josh Allen, one of the best fantasy quarterbacks, to drop back as often as Pittsburgh can possibly make him drop back. So it's just a weird situation right now where, like, obviously the best thing for Josh Allen fantasy-wise and for the Bills fantasy-wise is for him to throw the ball a lot, or at least to drop back a lot. Maybe he ends up scrambling with it. But from a football perspective, their passing game just isn't very good right now because the receivers are bad. Their run game is really good because James Cook and the offensive line are already good enough, but also you have the threat of Allen keeping the ball. So their run game has been really hard to stop. And I think Pittsburgh, based on what they have done against every other similar offense of late, I just really think they're going to commit to putting the ball in Allen's hands in a drop back situation and really trying to take James Cook out of things, which of all teams like Miami was able to do. So Pittsburgh, who has been able to do it every single time they've prioritized it, I think they'll be able to do it here. Yeah.
Love the call. I think it's a good spot. What else you got going on this week, Alex, and beyond? Just let the people know where they can find you, everything else you're doing at the moment, and then we'll get to the final stuff and get out of here.
Yeah, running a pretty cool promotion over on my Discord. It's 20% off either your first month or the year. So basically, anyone who has used this promotion so far, the promo code is Turkey Day. They have decided to take 20% off the entire year. Very much recommend doing that. And the other really cool thing is everyone who has joined as a viewer of Leverage Lane has found themselves just as they fit right into the community from day one. So it's been really cool to see. And I think it's a testament to the kind of show that you and I have been doing. So it's been a blast all season, and looking forward to finishing out the season strong.
Yeah, still got some good weeks ahead of us. I thought the bonus show this week was awesome. Our guy Ryan, big EVR fan, by the way. You can't spell. Ryan's got a good number of sayings around EVR, but good for him. And he says, love having Alex as a resource. He is so smart, explains things easily, much like Tambo does in terms of strategy. Knew him from golf shows, but man, he is just so smart and seems like a great dude. I agree. And that's why I like doing business with him and working with him on these shows. So hopefully we can continue to bring you these. This is a lot of fun going through it with you guys every single week. Make sure to check out Alex on X and then go check out his Discord as well. Over at Chip Nation, we do have the rest of season package, the $167 deal, but you can also go to the site right now and get the football only for $49 for the month. If you want to just check out the content only, even without Saber Sim, less than $50. The biggest thing about that is it gets you into the Ship It games. It's the last call for the Ship It games. It'll get you all 4 weeks remaining for your chance to get in and win one of the final golden Ship It tickets, where you will play off, and they top 50 that get in will play off for $85,000 in cash and prizes. So pretty big deal when it comes to that. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it. Make sure to tap that thumbs up on the way out. Hit the subscribe for Alex, for myself, ToeTagginTambo. Let's ship it.